Of course, yes, I am excited. We finally have a chosen candidate to meet Magnus Carlsen in the next World Championship match. Of course, this is the game between Grandmaster Alexander Grischuk with the white pieces and American Grandmaster Fabiano Caruana, who also holds citizenship in Italy. But for those of us who have met him and even played him over the board, as I have, of course, when he was a youngster, we consider him one of our own from New York, even though he was born in Miami, but he really hit his stride on the chess scene in New York at the old Marshall Chess Club. Even back in the days, those of you who remember who were around New York City at the time, there was the Manhattan Chess Club. All right, so let's get right into it. I'm going to flip the board because Caruana had the black pieces. And the it was oh boy, it was a pressure-packed atmosphere and great candidates tournament, by the way. I cannot wait until a book comes out, and with detailed analysis of the games and all the background anecdotes, etc. Because I am definitely going to purchase that, or even better yet, a DVD would be nice. But I would get both of them. I mean, there were so many great games and turn of just excitement, turn of events in the tournament. Fantastic analysis, along the way from Svidler, Gustafson, Judith Polgar. I don't know if you looked at the paid broadcast with Lawrence Trent and Judith Polgar, but just a lot of good chess, great chess, memorable chess. And this was Caruana's shining moment uh, after losing in round 12 versus Karyakin, right? His nemesis, right? The same guy who knocked him off the perch in the last candidates tournament. Because remember, Fabiano was that close to facing Magnus Carlsen a few years ago when he had lost and stumbled in the last round against Karyakin, and then wind up losing in tie breaks. Um, that was incredible. But then he came back, and then he has to face a similar test. He faces Karyakin in the 12th round, who made a vicious comeback of his own, and then Karyakin beats him again. Right, that had to be a stiff psychological blow. But did Caruana collapse? No, he didn't. He came back and handled his business. Okay, he came back and won. The game that he had to win. All right, he didn't take any chances. Right, he was worse on both tie breaks against Karyakin and Mamadarov. All right, so if Mamadarov had won today, we wouldn't even be talking about this because Caruana would have been worse on tie breaks with him also. All right, so let's look at this game. Let's get right into it. So Grischuk with the white pieces, Caruana with the black. Caruana has been adopting the Petrov the whole time. His second is Rustam Kazimjanov, who is a specialist in his defense. I like Grischuk's choice. Slightly offbeat. He plays this so-called Russian attack line. What would have been really interesting is for uh, for Grischuk just to go with the old this old Cochrane Gambit where he sacrificed a knight on f7. That would have been entertaining. But d4 was played, and I love the transpositions that take place in this game. So knight takes e4, d takes e5, d5, and theoretically, of course, black doesn't really have anything to worry about. But what Grischuk is trying to do is just transpose the game into a favorable structure and playable structure, and that is a common theme in modern chess. It's not about the evaluation, right? That's the chess of the 90s and 80s where it was like players were trying to get an advantage from the opening and keep that advantage all the way through. Nowadays, players are more or less accepting that there's going to be equality, but what they're doing is trying to get each other into positions that are less comfortable, right? Positions that they might not be as familiar with, and then outplaying them in the complications. So d5, knight bd2, knight takes d2, bishop e7 is also playable here. You could have a continuation like this with this quick exit of queens. And of course, knight d4. The game could go along this fashion with knight d7, bishop e2, and then rook e8 following, or even a move like c5. But Caruana simply traded off. Knight takes d2. Bishop takes d2. Now this gives black a little lead into white a little lead in development, as he has freely developed this bishop. But the bishop is like I like to say, is only half developed at this point. This bishop is going to have to move again, as this is not the ideal square for it. Bishop e7, natural move. Of course, keeping an eye on the square. c5. Now, to me, the game takes on a structure like in the Vienna system. Okay, what's the Vienna system real quick for the newbies? e4, e5, knight c3, right, knight f6, and then you play this this game right here, this gambit, d5, and then you have all different types of options, of course, you know, queen f3, but normal is like knight f3, bishop e7, say d3 for example, here, and here. Here's a common position in the Vienna game. You get knight c6, and you see how the structure is very similar. And white can play bishop f4, and you can see this structure is very similar to that which occurs in the game. That's why it's very important to understand structures, because you can be in a totally different opening and get a structure from another opening, right? So does it really matter that the game started off as a Petrov? No, it doesn't, if you understand the structure. As soon as I saw this, I said, oh, it reminds me of a Vienna. Now, when you get these transpositions, often the position is not going to be exactly alike, but very similar. So then the question presents itself, well, is this a better version of such and such an opening? Right, so if it looks like a Vienna, you say to yourself, is this a better version of the Vienna for black, or a worse version of the Vienna for white, since the structure is so similar? All right, so queen d7. Now, looking at this game, it was interesting because usually in the Vienna, you want to try to orchestrate f6 at some time, you know, after castles, f6, to get rid of this menacing pawn on e5. Such pawns like that are always very often prerequisites to a kingside attack, because the pawn creates a wedge in the opponent's position, makes it very difficult for a black to defend. For instance, you can't put a knight on f6, so it removes that, and it makes the king side in general more vulnerable to assaults. So e5, besides making it hard for black's pieces to communicate on both sides of the board, keep a lot of pressure in the position, and gives white a lot of space, as you can see with these two bishops here. So in this particular position, I was asking myself, how is black going to deal with this pawn on e5? So h3, and you can see black is trying to put some pressure here. For instance, this knight is defending e5, so you know the bishop is here, but still black doesn't have adequate pressure against the pawn. And then at this particular moment, f6 is really not reasonable here, just due to the fact that of course the bishop being attacked, but the king is still in the middle of the board. So bishop h5, and now bishop f4 by Grischuk. Moves like this have to be considered. Although here it might be somewhat premature, but it's very interesting, because black's king is still in the middle of the board. So let's say, for example, f takes e6. Knight e5 is possible, of course, allowing this. Say bishop takes d1. Knight takes d7. King takes d7. Rook takes. Rook a f8. And then it seems that white has some compensation, but really not enough after that move. So instead of leaving this pawn on Perhaps a move like h5, for example, just holding on to the pawn, and then it seems um, here that black has enough to hold the position. The queens are off the board, and the pawn position in the center for black is very solid. Back to the game. So, oh, sorry. So Grischuk, instead of going for this risky pawn sack here, he plays bishop f5, just overprotecting. And those of you who listen to my channel hear a lot of references to Aaron Nimzovich in his theories. Okay, so Nimzovich is talking about overprotection here, and basically, in a nutshell, once the pawn or whatever you're trying to protect is overprotected, it frees all of the pieces that are actually protecting the pawn. So what that means right here, for instance, you have 3 pieces on e5 from white. You only have 1 attacker. So what that means is that if white wants to, in theory, he could move the bishop away, he can move the rook away, and the pawn will still be protected. Of course, here he can't move the knight because of another tactic. The queen would be captured. But in theory, if we're just talking about the protection of the pawn, he can move the knight. And so when you overprotect, right, instead of your pieces being tied down to the defense, the overprotection actually frees up all of the pieces. Let's keep going. So queen e6 now. Now, what this does, of course, it attacks the pawn again, but Caruana realizes there's no real prospects of winning the pawn, but what he does is prevent any future ideas of sacrificing this pawn by playing e6. What I found interesting about this position was that Grischuk wasn't able to exploit the vulnerable looking position of this queen here on e6. a3 by Grischuk. What do you do here? You know? So a3 is a deep plan. Basically passes the ball back to Caruana, says, hey, what are you going to do? It's more than a high-class waiting move. There's ideas of b4, for example. If, especially if black try to castle on the queen side, right, just ripping open the b file. There's an idea of b4 even without the queen side castling, right? To challenge the d4 square, because after any kind of capture or even in advance, the d4 square is open. In some instances, there's even the idea of c4 being played at the right time, and then after d4 here, then the e4 square becomes open to the white pieces. Okay, so Caruana has to be very careful. If he tries to stay in the middle, then his coordination between the rooks is messed up, and with this b file opening, he may be vulnerable to an assault on the b file with the rooks rapidly taking possession of it. With all that said, it's difficult for white to do much because of the pressure exhibited by this bishop here on this on this knight right here, and that has a lot. This bishop on h5 has a lot of say in this position here. Now, so Caruana decides to castle, which is a natural lucky move here. Just real quick, another option, instead of a3, bishop e2 is an option, but this is kind of free, protects this knight, breaks the pin, and it's kind of like admitting a little bit that you made a mistake, but it might have been the best position, the best move in the position rather. Bishop g6 is a good move, for example, with equality. So anyway, a3, castle was played, and b4 anyway. Of course, Caruana is one to take. Remember what I said about this square? It's an anti-positional type move, and now you got this square that's vulnerable, and then also white has target down the file here. This pawn is also will be threatening the advance at some point. H6, another high class move. Hitting the ball, it's like in a volley in tennis. Hitting the ball back to the opponent, but at the same time, a very useful move in that keeps pieces off this square. G5, for instance, the knight coming here and attacking the queen, for example, at some point in the future. I was thinking at some time that Grischuk would try to employ the move G4, but it never materialized at this point of the game, especially after he played this move, Bishop G3, which kind of shut that idea out altogether. I figured he would play this way because being the last round of the game and having a chance to upset Caruana's title shots, I thought he would just play, all out pretty much. Even after G4, Black's game is decent. So, for example, G4, Bishop G6, takes, Rook B1, as we said, right down the file, B6, and let's say a move like A4. Black still has a good game, and White has taken on some weaknesses in his position also. So Bishop G3 is played. B6, very solid. Now this capture will just simply be met by the capture with the B pawn, maintaining integrity of the D4 point for Black. A little tactics. Queens come off the board, and now the pawn structure switches. Now earlier we had mentioned that the pawn structure reminded us of a Vienna game. C4, good move by Caruana. Now, to me, this pawn structure is even more favorable for Black. Why? Because it looks like the French advanced variation, but a good one for Black, a good version. Why? Because the light square bishop, which is usually a problem piece for Black, usually residing on C8 or the dismal square like B7 or even D7 at times, has been traded off already. This is a net positive for Black. Notice also these pawns being on light squares. Okay, so since the light square bishop is gone, it's good to put your pawns on light squares to mitigate the fact that you don't have as much protection on your light squares now with the absence of the light square bishop. This in turn, right, boosts the power and potential of the dark square bishop by putting the pawns on the light square. So in my eyes, Black's position is harmonious, and his chances to lose are quite diminished in this position. However, the bishop pair can be very dangerous if if White can open this position. This bishop is on an excellent diagonal, and now Grischuk from this point on seeks to improve the prospects of this bishop on G3. Bishop goes back to C2, and now B5. Again, putting more pawns on the light squares. Now Grischuk has an interesting idea, and what Grischuk would like in if he could have a few moves in a row, is he would like to bring both of these rooks to the C file, capture here on B5, and put tremendous pressure on this A6 square. Furthermore, he would like to play a move like F3 and then put this bishop on the beautiful diagonal, again putting more pressure on this square here. Alright, the net result of winning this pawn. See how the game continued. So A6, there's F3. Now idea is simply to go here with the bishop, just improving the piece. This also has the added idea of preventing, say, rook to A7 and rook A8, like doubling. Say if White was able to double on the A file, and Black would like to double in turn to maintain his pawn, but with the bishop on F2, it makes it difficult to put a rook there. Bishop comes out, G5. Probably the best square for this bishop at this point. Bishop F2. So notice Grischuk has Place his bishops on the best diagonals in the position. Okay, this position being closed does not favor the rooks at all. So the rooks kind of are in the background for a little while until we can find an open file for the rooks. Not forgetting about this pawn, Caruana seeks to keep Grischuk honest in the position. So Grischuk attacks this rook, and his idea is simply to go here, maintaining the protection of the bishop. Now, Fabiano plays rook fd8, and now bishop d6. Bishop g3 attacking the rook. Rook e2, and now g5. Excellent move, gaining space, of course, on the queen side, but also crippling on the king side, and also crippling the majority over there. These pawns cannot move. Right, all three pawns are dead on the king side. King f1. Caruana moves his king to the center, f7, and rook e8, bishop d6, and rook a c8. At this point, it's interesting psychologically because Caruana could have perhaps, moved the rook back again to see if Grischuk might go for repetition. But the other games were still going on. Karyakin versus Ding Liren was still going on, and also Mamedyarov versus Kramnik. Caruana keeps playing. Rook a1 now. Again, the idea is very simple. Is open up the c file and take it over and penetrate with the rook at some point. Okay, this knight here on c6 is the only obstacle keeping the rook from penetrating c7. Okay, so there's a lot of potential for white in this position if black slips up. The bishop is placed on a very dangerous diagonal for black, and you have this bishop here that's controlling the light squares. So black has to be careful. Rook ed8. Bishop drops back to b1. Again, if white has an opportunity, he would love to be able to play a move like that. Open this up and penetrate down the file. However, Caruana keeps this pressure on this pawn, which makes it problematic for Grischuk just to move that rook away from the e2 square. Rook d7. Now rook a3. Powerful move. Let me mention too, and it shouldn't be news to anyone, that Grischuk was in extreme time trouble here. I think starting about move 25 or something like that. So all of these moves are being played rapidly by Grischuk. Here, probably the best move was just play a takes here and then just play that. Okay, black still somewhat better. And say here, and then play this move. Okay, and like say if a move like that, and rook a7. And the idea is, of course, if rook takes a7. And white's activity is going to compensate for the pawn deficit there. Although he's not winning, but he definitely has enough compensation. So rook a3 instead. Now this flank maneuver allowed the classical response to a flank attack, which is to strike a blow in the center of the board. This is what happened. d4. Grischuk's position starts to deteriorate. A takes b5, a takes b5. C takes, knight takes, and now we just have a better version for black of the variation I just showed you. Instead of playing an extra move with the rook, he should have just opened up the position right away. This rook would have been on c6, okay, and this knight would have been getting attacked with tempi. So Caruana plays a real simple move. He just moves the knight back with more pressure on the e-pawn. Notice he never forgets about this e-pawn. He never lets Grischuk forget about it. Like, hey, you have weaknesses too. Bishop e4, and now some calculation. takes place. Great move by Caruana here. Of course, if knight takes here, that's possible also, but white can get perhaps a little more play here. The rook a7. Let's say rook d8. King e2. And move like bishop c6 here. And like I said, black is still better, but white is able to get a little bit more play than he does in the game. I like Caruana's choice. Bishop takes e5. What I really like is how the game took you know, had the logical progression during the game. Is again, Grischuk has set up this powerful e-pawn situation. I guess what I'm trying to say is I like the fact that the issues from the beginning of the game are still relevant going throughout the game, although the different structures were transpiring over the board. It was still an issue with this advanced e-pawn on e5 and what Grischuk was going to be able to do with it, using it as an attacking instrument versus Caruana trying to tear down the e-pawn. And we can see that black strategy finally triumphed, and that it ended with the victory of the e-pawn for black. So bishop takes c6, and Caruana played rook takes d6. Of course, this will be an error. Rook takes c6 because then this bishop would just capture this piece, and then you would be down a piece. So Caruana would have been down a piece. So anyway, rook takes d6. We see the tempo, the tempi gained on the bishop here. Grischuk takes a pawn, but he's down a pawn. And Caruana's rook is placed perfectly for the advancement of this pawn, so along with the bishop. So black is always going to have this advantage in his favor because this is a dangerous pawn, and white is going to have to watch it. Notice, even though white has a passed pawn, his pawn isn't as far advanced, and the bishop is in front of the pawn. So black's pieces are a little bit better coordinated than white's. Another major factor in the position is the opposite color bishops, which if the rooks are off the board, it's an easy draw. However, the rooks are on the board. It's a dangerous position. The reason why is, notice that all of these pawns remaining on the king side are all on light squares. This gives tremendous scope to the dark square bishop, and therefore black can easily set up a mating net around Grischuk's king if he is not careful. So this idea of setting up a mating net around the king, combined with the passed pawn on the c file, almost give black a winning position here. So white's only choice is to try to obtain some kind of counterplay, perhaps even trade off these rooks if he can, and try to utilize the advantage of having opposite colored bishops in the ending. And what's interesting about opposite colored bishops is that in the end game they're drawish, but in the middle game, right, and we could call this a queenless middle game, a la your Berlin Wall, right? In the middle game, a complex middle game, opposite color bishops favor the attacker. Why? Because it's difficult to defend. In other words, there's no counterpart to Caruana's dark squared bishop. So if he's got the initiative and is on attack, it's almost as if he's playing with the extra piece. Let's go on and see what happened. Rook d1, check, king e2, attack, right? It's important to have the initiative, especially with opposite colored bishops. Right, just attack and attack and attack. So the king move allows this rook to defend this pawn on g2. So Caruana attacks this one. Rook a7 check, king f6, and now bishop d7. I thought during the game that Grischuk was going to go for this move right here. Rook takes h7 with the idea of just bringing this guy afterward. So for example, let's say if he tried to play that move, if you have a move like rook a7. Rook takes b4 is a bold move because black really it has nothing to worry about. So for instance, let me show you that this square is guarded, so there's no check, and then this bishop is attacked, so there's really nothing to worry about. It looks more menacing than it is. So again, after a move like rook h7, this bishop would just have to come back to b7. So during the game, after rook a7 check, king f6, and Grischuk opted to play bishop d7. And the idea is, again, to become the attacking player with the opposite color bishop situation. Like I said, the player who holds the initiative with the opposite color bishops will be able to often gain an advantage because, again, it's like attacking with an extra piece. So he puts his bishop on attacking this light squared pawn on e6, and he just simply wants to add a rook to the attack. And again, it's problematic for black to defend. However, Caruana finds a nice remedy. He plays bishop f4, again maintaining the initiative in the position, and now rook d8. And again, have to be careful and watch out for possible mating nets. Okay, so Grischuk played rook c2. Let's say he just moves the bishop here, just making a dumb move just for illustration purposes. This rook just simply comes down the d file, right? And then there's nothing that can be done to stop the mate. Again, another idiotic move for illustration purposes, right? You just simply have rook e1, king f2, rook f1, king e2, and then rook b e1. So this is what I mean, having those opposite colored bishops in the middle game. Notice this is just like a free piece. There's nothing to stop the bishop. So instead, of course, Grischuk didn't move this bishop on d7 because I showed you the idea. Instead, he played rook c2, hoping to catch this guy. But rook takes b4. Why not? Now bishop c6 and c3. Great move here, and again, it's all based upon the vulnerability of the king. If he tries rook takes c3, then it ends in mate after rook d2. Notice the rook was protecting the second rank. Again, king f1, same ideas and principles. This is mate here after rook c1 and simply rook takes c1. So after c3, he has to acquiesce to another move. So rook d7 is played. Rook c8. Again, and Caruana plays this part with great vigor and determination. Again, if rook takes c3, rook b2. Right, this is all based upon the weakness of the king here. Let's say king e1, for example. Rook b1, king e2, and now rook b6. And now the bishop is going to be lost. Okay, rook c8. So now bishop e4. h5. Caruana just slowly improves his position here. He could have played rook b2 here. He just slowly improves. This is like a domination theme of the position. He's basically letting Grischuk know there's really nothing that you can do, and he just has to await events. h4, just the total crippling of the pawns on the king side of the board. Grischuk goes back. King e5. And Caruana is just improving the pieces. The position is going to, win basically by itself. Rook a1. Rook d8. Again, with all of the dark square weaknesses around the white king, there's constant mating threats. Can't give up the D file. Okay, 1. And now Caruana just simply blocks the D file, and also the idea of encroaching with the king. And the idea is basically to mate the king. So he's giving Grischuk two choices, like the Matrix, either the green or the blue pill or the red pill. Okay, the red pill is that you will get checkmated, and the blue pill is that the pawn on c3 will become a queen, right? Or you will lose large material. Okay, so that's the choices Grischuk is faced with, or being offered on every move that Caruana does. Rook a6, just keeping Caruana tied down to this pawn for now. The rook returns to the d file. Again, just orchestrating this mating net here. Here you have the rook going on the first rank. King f2. And now the move rook a1. You have these ideas, for instance, bishop coming here, bishop coming down. Checkmate. Rook c4. Rook d4. And now you say, well, if he's trying to checkmate, why is he offering exchange of rooks? Well, again, I told you he's offering Grischuk the red pill or the blue pill. One, that he's going to queen this pawn, which is going to cost a whole bunch of material from white, or he's going to checkmate. So here's the latter offer. He's saying, hey, you're going to trade rooks, I'll just make a queen. Grischuk says, nope. So then Caruana says, okay, I'm going to checkmate you then. I'm going to go here, here, and here. King comes out. Just taking some more squares. The king goes back. And now, here's another idea that could have been done. And then simply e5. The same type of idea here. And of course, if rook c4, I'll just show you if rook c4, then you can just take here. Again, winning material. Of course, there's check here. Again, king g8. Alright. So, I'm sorry, king g2 is coming. So after king f4, Grischuk played king f2. And now he simply just doubles the rook on the first rank. This was possible also. Bishop e1. He played in the most human fashion, especially someone that's tired. End of the tournament, just kept it real simple and clear. Okay, because you could just imagine the pressure Caruana was under. He was playing the clearest lines that he could see. He might have saw several lines, but he was going with the clearest ones. King e5. Bishop d3. Again, making that offer. Hey, you want to get mated, or are you gonna allow me to get a queen? Grischuk is stubborn. Rook e1. Rook c1. And finally, he basically extracts the exchange from Grischuk. Pawn is now guarded. And even with a little bit of pieces here on the board, you can see how powerful the opposite color bishops are when you have the initiative, because there's no way for white to properly defend against the dominance of the dark squared bishop. His light squared bishop is useless. And again, it's all a matter of who has the initiative. If Grischuk had the initiative, we will be talking about black's dark square bishop being useless. But it's white that's pressing, has the initiative, the extra pawn. So Therefore, it looks like black is just playing with the extra piece. King F4, Rook B4, E5. It's only fitting that black has all his pawns on dark squares. Rook B7, King to G3, and here Grischuk resigned. Again, there's really no more fight in the position. His last ditch effort would be a move like Rook G7, and then you can just simply take here. And there's a couple of continuations. F5, for instance, trying to exploit the position of the king. You just simply take here. And then perhaps a move like Rook takes G5. Then E takes F4. And then you have this problem. There's no way to get over and stop that pawn. So for instance, if you try to do Rook B5, right, you stop this pawn, but now the king comes out, and now you could just push these pawns. So let's say he checks again. King H3. So you go back. Now you just go here this time. That stops that repetition. Again, you gotta focus on that. H3. Again, trying to keep the king locked up here, but and so the basic idea is that there are just too many threats at this point for Grischuk to try to manage. All right, and so at this point, Grischuk had seen enough and resigned, and this gave Caruana the keys to face Magnus Carlsen in the next World Chess Championship, and I am excited about that. So I'm going for Caruana, and I'm gonna stand out on a limb, and I'm gonna predict already that Caruana will defeat Magnus Carlsen for the world title. I know that Magnus has a better score. It's 9-5, I believe, in classical with a bunch of draws. But I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Caruana is going to be our next world champion. So I hope you enjoyed my analysis today. And I look forward to seeing you again in the future on my next videos.